Let's go ahead and solve some inequalities, and we'll start with these two. Let's go to this first one here on the left. Now we're going to solve this just like we were doing a regular equation, as long as we're not multiplying and dividing by a negative number. And in that case, we'll have to switch the sign. But for now, we're just going to add and subtract here as we would with the regular equation. Now I like to get all my x's on the left, so I'm going to start by subtracting a 7x from both sides. That'll give us a negative 4x plus 2 is greater than or equal to negative 1. Now we can subtract this 2 from both sides, and that gives us a negative 4x is greater than or equal to a negative 3. Now here's where we're going to need to change things up a little bit, because we now need to divide by this negative 4. So this sign then needs to change now to greater than or equal to. So we're going to get x is greater than or equal to, a negative over a negative is now positive. X is greater than or equal to 3/4. So if we were to graph that on a number line, if we have 0 here and 1 here, so we're about right in here, and we're going to put a solid dot there because we're equal to, and it's going to be everything greater than or equal to 3/4. Now, in this case, we've got a little bit more of a complex situation. With all of these fractions, the very first thing that I want to do is I want to find a term that I can multiply all the way through and get rid of my fractions. So in this case, 4 times 5 is 20, and since 2 goes into 20, I'm going to multiply every term by 20. So that's going to give us here a negative 10x is less than or equal to, I'm multiplied by a positive, so I don't need to change this sign yet. So 20 into 4, that gives us 5. So we're going to have a negative 25 here, 5 times 5, plus 5 into 20 here gives us a 4. 2 times 4 is 8. So we have 8x. Now you'll see that's a lot easier to solve than this is, just by getting rid of that fraction right from the beginning. So now we can get all of our x's onto one side. So let's subtract our 8x. And that gives us a negative 18x is less than or equal to a negative 25. Now we're going to divide now by a negative. Divide by negative 18. So this sign now needs to change to greater than or equal to. And that gives us x is greater than or equal to, negative over a negative gives us a positive, so 25/18. Okay, so again, if we were to graph this, it'd be very similar to this, except for it'll be greater than 1, but we're going to include everything greater than and including 25/18 and above. Okay, so let's look at a couple others. This time let's look at the compound inequality. 3x is less than 5 minus 2x, which is less than 7 plus x. Let's go ahead and just split this up into two separate inequalities. We'll take this first one, 3x is less than 5 minus 2x, and we'll also take this one, 5 minus 2x is less than 7 plus x. And we're just going to solve each one of these separately. So let's get all of our x's on one side. We're going to add a 2x here. That gives us 5x is less than 5. Divide both sides by 5. And since we're dividing by a positive number, we're going to keep the sign the same. And we get x is less than 5. Now, solving here, let's go ahead and get all of our x's on one side again. So we're going to subtract an x. And that gives us 5 minus 3x is less than 7. Let's subtract our 5. And we get negative 3x is less than 2. Divide both sides by a negative 3. Now we've got to change the sign since we're dividing by a negative, and we get x now is greater than a negative 2/3. Okay, so if we were to graph this, this first one is telling us x needs to be less than 5. So if we were to draw that, we're going to leave an open circle here at 5. And we want everything less than. Here, we want everything greater than a negative 2/3. So that puts us right about here. And we want everything greater than. So if we were to rewrite this, the compound inequality would be negative 2/3. That looks ugly there. Is less than x is less than 5. And that gives us everything between negative 2/3 and 5. All right, let's do one more compound inequality, this time written a little bit differently. Sometimes you're going to get these inequalities, or the compound inequalities, that have this or in it. Meaning we want values of x that fit either this equation, or inequality, sorry, or this inequality, or both. Okay, so in this case, we're going to treat it just like we did our previous one. We're going to separate them into two separate inequalities. 2x minus 5 is less than negative 11. And over here, we'll do 5x plus 1 is greater than or equal to 6. So here, let's go ahead and add a 5 to both sides, and we get 2x is less than a negative 6. We divide both sides by 2. We get x is less than a negative 3. Now, we divided by a positive number, so we're going to keep this sign the same. Let's do the same thing over here. This time, we're going to subtract a 1 from both sides, and we get 5x is greater than or equal to 5. Let's divide by a positive 5, so we're going to keep the sign the same. And we're going to get x is greater than or equal to 1. Now, if we were to graph this, let's put 0 here. Let's put our negative 3 about here, and our 1 right there, and that's obviously not to scale, but if x is less than negative 3, then we're going to have an open circle here, and we want all values of x less than negative 3, or we want all values greater than or equal to, so let's do a solid dot here. We want all values of x equal to or greater than 1. So our graph would look like this, where we have everything except for those numbers between negative 3 and up to, but not including 1. Okay, so I hope these are helpful to you. You get all sorts of different issues that come up with inequalities, but just break them down into their smaller parts. Just remember, whenever you're working these or manipulating these, whenever you multiply or divide by negative 1, just flip that sign. That's one of the most important things to remember whenever you're working with these. But they really aren't that difficult to play around with as long as you remember that one rule. If this is helpful, please like and subscribe. Pass this information on to those who it might be helpful to, and thanks for watching.